Why this angle? Because I'm trying to catch the last glimpse of sunlight. And I also don't want you to see that I'm wearing pink shorts. Hi guys, it's Kamil here, and I'm coming to you today with the review of No Signal Area by Robert Perisic, translated from Croatian by Ellen Elias-Bursac. The novel was published originally in 2014, but the English translation came out only this year, in 2020, thanks to 7 Stories Press. Robert Perisic is a Croatian writer that made his debut in Croatia in terms of novels in 2007 with his novel titled Our Men in Iraq. English translation that came out in 2013 was praised by likes of New Yorker and Guardian. I'm quite eager to read Our Men in Iraq, as I've heard that aside of Perisic's favorite topic, and that being a post-communist society on the crossroads between communist mentality and capitalist market, in that novel, Perisic built also parallels between Balkan wars and the Iraqi one. And that sounds fascinating to me. But let's get back to No Signal Area. No Signal Area is quite comical on the surface and quite a cynical story about 2 childhood friends, cousins, Nikola and Oleg, trying to revive an old factory producing communist-era turbines in a small town called N, a place forgotten by a capitalist dream. The turbines are to be sold to a general in one of Arab countries where those type of turbines are still operational because of an embargo imposed by the Western countries. That is an opening to the novel, in which Robert Perisic introduces almost an uncountable variety of characters, as he himself says.
A lot of people are involved, a lot of people from different classes, from some kind of elite, not very legal elite, also something very near to criminal, and working class people who are working in the factory.
And also an ambitious number of themes, but I will focus only on the most prominent ones. What struck me the most, and that is an overarching aspect of all of the themes, is the writer's sensitivity to the detail. I mean, obviously it's not a rule, but I find this quality to be quite common for the novelists that are also poets, and Perisic is both of those. Very early in the book, there's a scene where Oleg and Nikola drive through a small city, small town, and are forced to follow a bus, blocking the way. And Perisic writes something like, "A small town can be ruined if you pace through it with too long a stride." And that approach to detail specified here characterizes his novel in general. Perisic shows former Yugoslavia society. To clarify, when I use the term former Yugoslavia, I'm referring to a group of countries that gained independence after the collapse of Yugoslavia. And those are Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Serbia. Yeah. So, as I said, Perisic shows former Yugoslavia society mostly through working class. It's very telling that in describing that society, he didn't name any nationality, didn't name any countries, nor places. And it's because, as I believe, to demonstrate the common experience of all former Yugoslavian nations, which during the Cold War lived in a country that was envied by many other communist societies. Yugoslavia in Soviet bloc was seen as some sort of communist paradise, a country with much more freedom and a better standard of living than in most other countries in the Soviet bloc. And that is the same society that after the collapse of Yugoslavia, drawn into what was the bloodiest wars Europe's seen since the Second World War. And those wars were not free from genocide or ethnic cleansing. The total number of people killed following the breakup of Yugoslavia is estimated to be around 140,000. And we are talking about Europe in the 90s. The biggest casualties were on Bosnian side, and additionally to that, up to 50,000 Bosnian women were raped during the Bosnian part of the war, giving birth to a couple thousands of children who often even now face ostracism in their own country. I wanted to recall those horrific events to underline the weight of the material Perisic was dealing with, and to underline that the war, even though it's recalled in no single area, there are many retrospections showing some of characters' experiences during the war, but war is never on the front page. It's always told in a way that the blood is not on the front page, but rather in the background as a retrospection. Regardless that for many characters that was the reason their lives were destroyed, like the one of Sobotka, the main engineer in the factory. The war brought the separation from his wife and daughters, who emigrated to one of Northern European countries as refugees. However, the topic Perisic is the most interested in is the society in the transformation from communism to capitalism. It almost feels like one of the main characters in Perisic's novel is a general public, a society captured between those two systems, on the crossroads between past and ever-escaping presence. To demonstrate that social and political confusion, his characters are rather those that lost during the transformation, the ones left on the sideways when the train destined to capitalism left. Those are inhabitants of countries that didn't catch up with the West due to damaging wars, or the character's lack of education, or simply due to missing out on the opportunities for quick money making when state-owned industry was sold for nothing. Perisic also is able to show a darker side of capitalism. There's an interesting paragraph explaining the difference between current oligarchy and the one of the past. The members of the communist administration, as one of his characters explains, were just administrators, owing little material wealth in comparison to current ones. And therefore, their power was not rooted and was dependent on inner party politics. While now, those in power have their position rooted in money, rooted in the wealth they were able to accumulate. So one can vote them out from a chair of one public institution or the other, but they still stay in power because they will still be the owners. This is how capitalist dynasties are created, and the gap between those poor and those in power only increases. You know, I grew up in the period of Polish transformation to capitalism. I was 5 years old when communism in Poland collapsed, and the struggle of everybody I knew during the transformation period, including my own parents, was so close to what Perisic describes in this book that I was in constant awe of the accuracy of the real-life descriptions coming from those pages. And don't get me wrong, this is not a book glorifying the previous period. Even though Yugoslavia during Tito was probably the most liberal of communist countries, and when it collapsed, the population turned against each other in the most brutal way Europe's seen in ages. This book does not glorify the period of Tito's regime, but there is sort of nostalgia piercing through, I'd say. I think that what Western society is failing to grasp sometimes is that for many people that were left to themselves and didn't adjust to capitalist markets well, due to their professions becoming obsolete or local factories shutting down, missing the profitability factors, KPIs, or those industries being sold to foreign capital, those people obviously will look at the balanced life they once had under the old regime and think about it with nostalgia. That's quite understandable. Not even mentioning the horrifying wars that came with the collapse of the old regime. I think Perisic, being the man from within the system, is showcasing those feelings extremely well. But he doesn't stop there. As mentioned earlier, there's also a criticism of current consumption-driven society. Like in the fragment here. I changed at one point when I saw how everybody else had changed. I changed, miraculously, into nothing, became indescribable. And in that state, I moved among people who no longer exist, because they've been taking blows morning till night to the head and ears. They've been flexed like a muscle and stretched, curled, stooped and furled, pounded into the dirt, dredged and tilled with a pick. Until up they sprue anew, fertilized and slightly artificial. Though they looked real, they were all cultivated, raised in a greenhouse like a celestial television, and now they're limping around with their new gadgets. I see, they are all in constant contact. All day long they are walking around like they're embroidering and stitching needlepoint, talking to themselves out in the street. And I'm crazy? Me the crazy one? Because I yell? What's the most interesting, though, is the fact that the criticism comes from local loony. To underline that in our society, only the madman can showcase the treachery of the system. The sensitivity to the emotional spectrum characterizes also female-male dynamics in this novel. Those relationships are quite often romanticized, if not quite nihilistic in case of some of them, but they ring very true. And here is a lovely fragment when this type of head over heels love is described from the perspective of the same woman that experienced it, but just a few years older. I had a love affair that, disoriented me. After that, I didn't know who I was anymore, or who I was when I was in love. I didn't know who I was, see? I'm still not sure, but maybe I was what people call a gold digger. It's the relationship, I realize, the who are you stuff. It's not just you, it's many relationships, but there's always one that stands out. Something always stands out and takes you far away. And if that something abandons you, you're disoriented like a soldier after a war. And there are many paragraphs like the one I just read. As you probably gathered from everything I just said, I like this novel quite a bit. However, there is one general issue that was bothering me. I don't want to call it a lack of focus, but the number of issues and even characters through which those issues are addressed could be cut down with the benefit for the book. I understand that this sort of chaos might have been done to introduce various shades and issues former Yugoslavian countries are dealing with, but there were a few moments when I was thinking, just please don't introduce another issue, as it's way too tight already here. For instance, when Sela, a love interest of Nikola, being on a date in his apartment, starts thinking about the need of going back home to use the toilet. In the same time, she is thinking about the societal standards of being a woman. This was one of those moments when I, who would like to think about himself as a feminist, was thinking, no, stop here. There's no room for feminist issues in this novel. There is way too much going on already. Another aspect I will be probably asked about in the comment section below, and that is if one needs to know the history of the region to understand this book better. I mean, surely, if you know it, if you know the history, it always counts, like with every other novel that doesn't try to be a history book as much as a novel. For you, Janitas. Oh. But it doesn't mean you will be lost not knowing the history and you won't be able to enjoy or appreciate this very good piece of fiction. You will. Okay, guys, as always, if you'd like to recommend to me some titles from former Yugoslavian countries that you think I might enjoy, please go ahead and leave a comment down in the box below. And that's all for today, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.